Hello, peeps. I wanted to come on here to chat a bit to you about my thoughts on a particular band that are out at the minute. Excuse the vans outside, but we're just gonna do this. It's the band Sleep Token, and I know that I'm probably a bit late to the party on this one because everyone's already had their go shitting on Sleep Token because a lot of people seem to think they're terrible. I mean, they've got a fair few detractors, particularly music critics, and a lot of metal elitists seem to hate them. Their reasons for why I'll get into in a minute, but they also have a fair few defenders. Like, I remember I saw an article with artists like Korn saying that Sleep Token's download festival set, like, shut up the haters kind of thing. Which, I mean, maybe, if they've got a good show, that's fair enough, and clearly they've got loads and loads of fans, because they are easily one of the most successful groups in modern metal, I would say, because I feel like they're kind of bringing metal to the like the TikTok audience, essentially, right? Like, you get bands like particularly a lot of the new metal bands of the 90s were having a moment on TikTok, like Deftones is one that comes to mind, and Linkin Park and Slipknot are bands that have kind of a revival on TikTok because of like modern metalhead goth archetypes on TikTok. But I feel like Sleep Token definitely kind of saw that and kind of seek to capitalize on it, because my first problem with them isn't that they simply seem like they make music to cater to a demographic, which it does seem like they are doing, and that's one separate point into itself. But it's really style over punch. Like, first of all, they're supposed to be anonymous, right? With the main songwriter being this guy called Vessel, and they all wear these really elaborate costumes, and they don't really give interviews, and blah de blah de blah, all of this. But the thing is, like, anonymous musicians aren't really a novelty anymore. Like, there was Slipknot in the 1990s, but there was also Gwar. Even before that, you had like Zola X, who were like pretending to be aliens from a like distant planet. You had the like destroyed dubstep Daft Punk rock band thing that I'll put a clip up of here. You've had the Residents going since the 1970s, which I know they're not necessarily a rock band, but, still, I just don't feel like being anonymous has that same novelty, number one. But also, it's kind of riding that line where you kind of want to be anonymous and not at the same time. Like, giving yourself a name and a look and a costume and a kind of vibe about you. It's like trying to be anonymous as little as possible, but the only thing you're not doing is giving your actual name. Like, it would have been cool if, they just put out a record totally anonymously, right? Like, no pictures, no names, not even a fucking band name on the front of the album. Like, no way to even begin to quantify who might even be behind it. That would have been cool, because I feel like that's kind of a novel concept. Wherever have you come across, like, a blank album with no band listed anywhere on it at all? So that was, maybe that would have worked, but I don't think, like, trying to be quote-unquote anonymous when you're really not being, it's just you in a costume with an alias. It's not got the same novelty anymore. I mean, that's a very slight problem. So my problem with them, just beyond gimmicks really, is that I feel like their combination of sounds just doesn't lend itself well to an album, and I'll get onto in a minute some of the examples of bands that I think do, but I think that their combination, right, is like very poppy pop, or like trap. So we're thinking like pop trap that was like, R&B, but then also combine that with like really like super hulking metalcore. Like, I don't know a lot of metalcore bands, like maybe Killswitch Engage. I do like Killswitch Engage. That, but like just, those massive hulking like sledgehammer riffs combined with like eerie pop trap. It's a bit of a weird combination. And I also would say that the pop that they're like kind of trying to gel the metal side with, it's not even necessarily a flavour of pop that's really in the zeitgeist right now. Like, I would say that the kind of pop that they're dealing with It sort of like reminds me of The Weeknd during like his Hills era. Like it's that kind of like moody, spacey R&B trap kind of pop fusion that I'm just like, that hasn't played anywhere relevant since like 2018, 2019, I want to say. I mean, granted, they can take it and do what they want with it, and people seem to like it. But I mean, and I might be kind of pigeonholing them by saying like, oh, they're doing it to fit a demographic, because surely my thought would be, if you're playing with pop music that is at least 5 years out of date, surely you're not then trying to cater for the pop audience. Because what you would do now, if you're catering for the pop audience, is like, fuse super hulking, massive, like robotic, pristine metalcore with like fucking hyperpop like Charlie XCX or 100 Gex or whatever, which like would be a fucking disaster unto itself. But that's not really the point I'm trying to make here. The point is, I feel like their fusion, not only does it not really work, but I also feel like it feels less like they sat down as a band and went, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we fused metal and pop? That might have some interesting results as a creative musical group. It doesn't feel like they really did that. It felt like they wanted to write pop songs, but for some reason they didn't think that would make them look cool enough, I guess is how it seems to me. So, like, they want to write pop songs really, really badly, but in order to not be seen maybe as lame, they decided to throw in a bunch of, like, really heavy metalcore riffs and dress in silly costumes, and they're like, oh, so it's kind of like a way of, like, oh, they wanted to write pop songs, but they put the metal stuff and the mysterious stuff in there, just to be like, look guys, we're metal too, we're cool, right? Like, yeah, we write pop songs, but like, we're metal, that's cool, right? I mean, that's me just like conjecture, but it really comes across that way, especially when you listen to their music. And I think that's the reason why they get so many metal elitists backs up. I mean, metal elitists don't like genre fusion at the best of times, but I think the reason is they just do it shit. Like, I don't know what else to say, really. Like, new metal bands, again, right? That's rap and metal, maybe electronica, maybe a bit of grunge. Those coalesce decently. And even if you're not talking about straight up new metal, if you're going more in the vein of like just general rap rock, you've got Rage Against the Machine, and you've got Censor, and you've got fucking, even if you want to go really left field, you've got like Atari Teenage Riot, who do really cool stuff with like electronics and like metal guitars. Those are cool because you've kind of got, with Atari Teenage Riot, if we're taking the most extreme example, you've got those like super thumping, repetitive, pounding gabba rhythms, but with like grunge guitars and metal guitars over the top of them, which is just such an overwhelmingly like energetic sensation that has a kind of cool vibe to it. Whereas, like, I feel like with Sleep Token, they're combining two styles that, at least in their more modern guises, their whole purpose is to be pristine. Pop and R&B, especially in more modern terms, it's like really sleek, really spacey, really moody. And then metalcore, actually, I believe the technical term for what they do is actually djent. I think they fall under djent, technically. Like, it's heavy music, but it's like preened heavy music, you know what I mean? It's like the edges are cut off, trying to leave the bulk in there. You're not getting any bum notes, you're not getting any like really raucous, noisy, kind of edgy sounds. It's just the heaviness, just purely the heaviness of the riff, just like the bang, and that's all you're getting. It's just the force of the riffs and basically nothing else, is what a lot of metalcore, modern metalcore seems to me, because a lot of it as well is like snap to the grid, quantized, sometimes programmed drums, I would say, as well. And so I feel like, fusing those two things that are already so, like, overdone in themselves is, like, it's kind of like a disaster waiting to happen. And I think it is, again, a lot of it's to do with that kind of fusion thing where, maybe they looked at the success of people like Limp Bizkit and Slipknot and Linkin Park on TikTok, and they were like, oh, okay, so genre fusion is like the in thing, like it's a cool thing. And for sure, like, artists in the pop sphere have experimented with metal more recently, for sure, and there are examples that I'll get onto in a minute, or I guess in a couple of minutes, but it's like they they thought that, like, genre fusion is all you needed to do to, like, get people to think you were novel, and so they just did that, it seems like. I mean, I guess it's kind of working in a weird way, but it's like, it's as if they just have the idea of the fusion, but they just kind of took the two most lowest common denominator versions of, like, okay, what's the most, like, lowest common denominator, heaviest but accessible and easily replicatable brand of metal? Okay, modern metalcore. Okay, what's the, like, lowest common denominator, most, like, moody and maybe, like, intriguing form of pop music that's still widely palatable? Oh, like modern spacey R&B. Okay, we'll just do that. The actual fusion of sounds was the afterthought. It's just the idea of the fusion itself that seems to take the front seat, I guess. I mean, I guess what I should do is actually talk about Sleep Token's new album, Even In Arcadia, which I won't be talking about in any great detail, because this is more just like a rant video, I guess. And I'll actually just go down the line here and read you the notes that I sent to my dad, because he heard Richard Osman on the Rest is Entertainment podcast talking about Sleep Token, where he called them, like, the least metal thing happening in metal. Like, I think the way he put it was, like, you could put them through, you know, airport security and it wouldn't flash up.
It's the least metal thing I've ever heard. You could put this in your hand luggage and it would go through the scanners. If you've not listened to them, go onto Spotify. It's sort of everything all at once. There's kind of some new metal there, there's EDM in there, there's alt pop, there's pop rap, there's a bit of shoegaze. He sings in a very operatic style, but then he's guttural kind of screams as well. It's a very, very peculiar sound.
Do I agree with that? No, but I do see where he's coming from. So what I said was, like, is it absolute, indefensible, completely irredeemable, trash, fucking garbage, awful? No. Is it bad? Fuck it, yeah. It's bad. And you kind of go, okay, I can list to you every single reason why that is bad, but it doesn't make me want to, like, vomit piss and jump out of a window. Like, my big critique with it, really, is that, it's like I say, the fusion is not even really done correctly. Like, with good fusion bands, you have the elements of the genres that they're trying to, like, you know, put together, kind of weaving in and out of each other at the same time, you know. So Enter Shikari is a great example of a band that melds, you know, pop and electronic and metal, because, you know, you've got the metal riffs going, but then you've also got, like, maybe a synth arpeggio going over top of it with, like, a more pop style chorus, you know, which obviously not every Enter Shikari song is fantastic, and they've definitely leaned more in a poppier direction with their more recent albums. But in my mind, their most recent album, Kiss for the Whole World, kind of typifies how good they are at it. Like, you look at a song like the opening track, title track of Kiss for the Whole World, you know, it's got that really heavy kind of, like, slamming, again, metalcore kind of riffs, but then you've also got a very poppy, catchy chorus, but with those more synthetic elements going in the background as well, but not in a way where it seems so tacky that you just, like, feel your face sinking inside itself with cringe. Like, it feels like as though there was actual craft put into it as a song. You even get that on some of the, like, earliest songs, like Mothership maybe, where, like, you get these, like, big metalcore breakdowns, but these massive, huge, like, dramatic vocal sections with the synthesizers and stuff going over top. Like, you know, there's actual songcraft going on there. Whereas here, it just feels like bits of pop songs and bits of metal songs, like, taped together, almost kind of like a composite rather than an actual song. It's like they had 4 minutes of a pop song, and then they went, okay, right, we've got this, like, random metal riff idea clunking about, but we've got nowhere to put it. And they just sort of went, oh, how about we just glue it to this 4-minute pop song? And they went, oh, great. That's not fusion, though. It's just like a few bits of songs taped together that the styles are so disparate that, like, yeah, it's going to catch you off guard. And some people might mistake that for a feeling of exhilaration, but it's not. It's just being caught off guard. It's like how when horror films put a sound so loud that your body involuntarily can't help but jump. It doesn't mean that you were scared. It just means that it's like a cheap, like, shock tactic or a flare tactic, which is often how their music feels. You know, it'll just be like a normal, pretty standard spacey R&B tune, and then all of a sudden you've got these massive chugging walls of guitars that just barrel in out of nowhere, and it just doesn't make any sense. More to that point, there are songs on the album that are basically just pop songs. Like, Past Self, just a pop song. And let's not forget the title track either, which it itself is just, like I say, another moody, kind of pop-centric piano ballad type track. I don't know how I forgot about that one. Damocles, I'd say, is maybe the best example of a song on the album where they do genuinely try to fuse it, I guess, because the metal riffs are more prominent throughout that track rather than just being relegated to their own, like, separate section. Actually, I'd probably say, looking back at it, that maybe a song like Gethsemane is maybe the best example of, like, the fusion of the sounds, like, as a through line. Because I think, like, listening back to it, Gethsemane is definitely kind of more consistently melded, if you like. But point being, there are just songs on here that are just straight pop songs, and if it weren't for the last 3 minutes of Infinite Baths, that is maybe the most egregious example, because it is just a 5-minute pop song and then a 3-minute metal breakdown. Same with the opener as well. I feel like this would be hated on a lot less if it was just a pop album. Pop music is pop music. Everyone loves pop music. That's why it's called pop music, you know. I mean, yeah, the sounds that they're working with might be like 5-6 years out of vogue at this point, but I think if they just put out the tunes on the album as just like spacey R&B, like slightly melodramatic kind of songs, people might be like, oh, well, you know, it's kind of like dated by this point, but like it's not bad, probably. Like it's a bit tacky, yeah, sure, but like it's fine. But then people, you know, go to what Sleep Token actually is, and what they see is a decently tacky R&B song, but with massive chugging, soulless, pristine, mechanical walls of guitar riffs over it, which just makes it even more gross. In my mind, really. I put a note here that it feels like metal for theatre kids, which is so true. Like, everything's so overdone and pristine and clean and soulless. Like, again, the guitars are just massive to the point where you can't get any kind of dynamism or, like, emotion or grit from them, because it's just, like, the cleanest, most, like, packaged version of metal guitars. You know, the drums feel very snap to the grid. The trap pop production is, again, very spacey, very clean. And the vocals are super overacted as well. Like, you just have to go onto the opening track, and the vocals are just, like, the most melodramatic, but also kind of sort of trying to sound, like, sultry and mysterious, but in the most, like, theatre kid way possible. Like, he's just fucking moaning half the words, like, can you hold this eclipse in me? It's like pop R&B vocal fry, just taken to, like, the worst, most extreme and annoying extent. And it's just, like, it's so overacted and it's so overdone, and it's so desperate to kind of convince yourself of its deepness. And again, it's just like the poppiest of pop combined with the hugest, heaviest, most, like, muscly guitars and drums. It's just too much. Like, you know, there's no levity. There's just none. It's, well, I guess you could say that the R&B sections are levity because they're quieter, but it's just like the most potent of the two extremes coming together to the point where you're like, oh, you've not even found, like, a relatively interesting middle ground basically at all. But one of the things that they have also missed is that metal, and this goes for a lot of bands, right? I even wrote a fucking article on it that you can go read in the description, is that I don't think metal should be a heaviness arms race, right? It shouldn't just be that. And I even said in the article that I wrote, like, my big conclusion for it was, if all you're looking for from metal is just pure heaviness, not songwriting, not flair, not originality, not interesting genre fusions, for instance, if all you're looking for is just heaviness, you're going to end up with shit songs. And that's how I feel like the metalcore on this album feels, because it is just the heaviness of metal and the bigness, for lack of a better word, of metal, without the songwriting, without the originality, without the raw production, without any, like, interesting like kind of grungy, scrappy noisiness. It's like the most like surface level husk of what metal is. To me, like one of the big things in metal for me that I love is feel, right? If I'm going back to those early new metal albums that I cut my teeth on, like, you know, Korn, Slipknot, Limp Bizkit, let's say all the Ross Robinson ones, right? So like the debut Korn album, the first two Slipknot albums, and the debut Limp Bizkit album, right? Those albums had feel because you felt the imperfections in the, particularly in like the first Slipknot album, and I'd say especially that first Limp Bizkit album, that's just kind of so noisy and so scrappy and so kind of lo-fi and garagey, and like, you know, sometimes the band are barely playing in sync with each other, but it just has this like pure, unbridled, raucous energy to it that's just so infectious. And then the same on Slipknot's first album as well, because it was kind of, you know, it was like mixed on tape, but it's not, you know, not all the waveforms are like crushed to fuck. You know, there is a bit of like dynamism to it and dynamic range, and the production is kind of raw and rough and ready, but that's what makes that album cool. And yeah, the production on Iowa is like potently more muscly, but there is still a bit of that kind of oddball, creepy, kind of ambient spirit weaving throughout it that's really cool. And then those, you know, that the first Korn album, and I'd say Follow the Leader as well, even if it's not, you know, Ross Robinson produced, but a lot of those early new metal albums, it was all about the drums and the bass, right? Like a Ross Robinson quote that I might put a clip of here is like, you know, the way that he approached production, it was all about the low end. It was all about how the bass and the drums hit and the groove kind of moves something deep in your gut.
And it was the introduction to this Ross Robinson production technique. No top end, all about the low end, all about the bump.
The way the low end hits, you know, it moves something else in your gut that straight metal doesn't really have the ability to do.
And I like that because to me the groove is what gets your head banging. You know, that's what gets me moving. You know, the groove. It's one of my favourite band is The Prodigy, you know, because they have that heaviness, but it's with the propulsive beats and the groove of dance music. So it's kind of got the best of both worlds, I suppose, in a way. The first few Korn albums, they're very, very funk, hip-hop influenced. There are versions of Korn, the debut, and Follow the Leader from 1998, though not produced by Ross Robinson, that are just the drums and the bass, right? If you go and listen to those on YouTube now, the quality of the grooves is unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. Like tracks like Ball Tongue, they have such an immense groove to them. You know, the way you've got the really snappy, funky drums combining with fieldy slap bass, but then you've also got that really deep 808 bass kind of doubled underneath it. It just has such a potent, just like, it moves something in your core, in your gut, that makes your head bang. Same with a lot of the drum tracks that I'm sure you can find from tracks off the first few Slipknot albums, like the drum and bass tracks off of there. And even on the first few like Limp Bizkit albums, I guess because they were more prominently hip-hop, they had some of that bounce and some of the groove inherent in hip-hop, so it got you moving. Whereas Sleep Token, to get back to them, because metalcore is so massive and so hulking and so great and mechanical, but it's also so slow, because I feel like it's trying to kind of give this grand scale of how heavy it is, but they couldn't really do that as well as they wanted to with, like, you know, a decent sized groove. So all the tracks are really slow, and I guess this is just my problem with, like, a lot of metal that reaches for, like, a super heavy sound, often of which is kind of metalcore tinged, is, like, the songs themselves are kind of so slow and so hulking that I'm like, there's nothing for me to attach to. You know, it's like, the riffs sound heavy and the guitars are very loud. Wow. But yeah, I'm just sat there. I'm not headbanging. I'm not dancing. I'm not, like, you know, doing... The most you might get out of it is, like, doing one of those, like, gnarly, like, scrunched face riff faces, which, like, yeah, those are cool, but to me that should always come with, like, you know, you're moving while your face is scrunching. Like, you know, if I'm there bouncing to a track, I want to be like, ugh, yeah, but then also have something to, like, you know, bottom my head along to, rather than just sitting there being like, wow, this is heavy, man. Because to me, that just makes it really dull. Like, I listen to Sleep Token, and because I'm not moving, because the guitars are so heavy and loud, I don't really feel anything. I just feel numb and dull after listening to it. Again, it's super pristine pop, mixed with hulking great mechanical slabs of guitar. There's no feel, it's just robotic. I think that note really sums up everything I was trying to say. But, like, yeah, metal isn't just a heaviness arms race, people. There are other things to it. Aesthetics, feel, groove, creativity. And to me, like, Sleep Token try to have creativity and fail. And, you know, I won't go on about genre fusion again, because, like I say, it's either haphazard, like taped together, or they just don't do it at all. And to be fair, as much as, like, I've talked about how dated the sounds are, the straight-up pop tracks were probably the least offensive to my ears. Like, they weren't fucking great by any stretch of the imagination, but they didn't leave me scratching my head wondering what the fuck they were even trying to do. Like, I'm like, oh, they're writing a pop song. Like, it's a bit shit, but, like, they've tried to write a pop song, and it's not horrific. So, you know, kudos. But they do that maybe twice, 3 times, and everything else is just, like, haphazard fusion. I feel like if you're a fusion band, you've really got to commit to the bit. And I feel like with the way that Sleep Token do it, the way it's so taped together, or not there at all, it does kind of link to that earlier comment where I'm like, the metal aesthetics and all of that, it is really just a cloak for making it seem cooler than it is. Like, they just wanted to write pop songs, but they needed that kind of cool factor so people would accept them and not just think they were fucking lameoids. I mean, I've already talked about how Enter Shikari are a great example to fuse the metal and electronic and pop with the way that they do it, how it's very considered, how all the elements are weaving in and out of each other. But if you wanted a more poppy example, right, because if I'm saying that Sleep Token might as well be a pop band, I'll give you a more poppy example, but also maybe a more salient example in a way, because this is a metalcore band that fuses pop with early 2010s or like early 2000s dance pop, which is maybe the most garish and ridiculous fusions of sounds that you've heard of in your life. But it is also kind of a direct parallel to Sleep Token, in that Sleep Token are taking more modern forms of pop music and fusing them with metalcore, but this band were taking the, you know, the like flavours of pop that were cool at the time and fusing them with metalcore. And that's I See Stars, right? I'm talking particularly about I See Stars' first 2 albums, let us say. I mean, they do it throughout the catalogue, but when you get into albums like New Demons and stuff like that, you know, the sounds of dubstep and brostep were coming along, so they were fusing that a lot more into their tracks. But if we're talking about, like, super kitschy, cheesy dance pop music, like early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, then I See Stars' first 2 albums are, like, a really good example, because it has not aged well at all, right? The like, you know, you'll get like massive metalcore guitars going over these like dance pop drum machine beats and like garish synthesizers with someone doing an auto-tuned vocal harmony over the top, right? That has aged like fucking rancid milk. Tracks like Sing This, which is definitely just a more pop flavoured kind of interlude track with Busy Bone from Bone Thugs and Harmony. That thing fucking... I remember I had that song on in the gym, right? First time I'd heard it, and it was that bad that out loud I went, fucking hell, this has not aged well. In the middle of a fucking public gym, I was like, Jesus Christ, this is kind of awful. But, the thing I would say about I See Stars, they commit to the fucking bit. Like, yeah, the sounds that they're using are really garish and cheesy and kind of horrible, but, you know, they commit to the bit. It sounds like they wrote these songs as being like, oh, you know, this metal part's cool, but oh, wouldn't it be cool if we put a kind of dance pop breakdown in the middle of it with some auto-tuned harmonies? And they were like, oh yeah, no, we'll integrate that as part of the song. It's not like they had a dance pop song and they had a metal song and that's just like 2 separate parts that don't ever meet. No, it's like, it's a mixture. Sleep Token's sound feels like the musical equivalent of wearing odd socks, whereas I See Stars is just you're wearing a matching pair of really garish, ridiculous, stupid looking socks, but like at least they're a matching pair. I'm not saying it's good, but what I will say is that I See Stars I think has a genuinely enjoyable kind of kitschy, cheesy quality, while a lot of the performances, especially on those early albums, because they're more like MySpace era, they're not snapped to the grid. They're not like clean and pristine. They are a bit rough around the edges, and they are a bit kind of, demo quality and a bit garage. But that's what's charming about them to me. Like, yeah, I can look at them and go, they are pretty objectively fucking bad, but I'm still gonna bump it. I don't give a fuck. They're kind of a guilty pleasure band to me, but I feel like their performances feel more human. Their songs feel more. There's more intention in their songs. They commit to the bit more, and as much as it might be pretty garish and cheesy and aged about as well as like a fucking gollywog, the end result I'd say is more enjoyable. Whereas Sleep Token, I feel like try to be too deep and profound and like dark and mysterious for their own good, while also not fusing the sounds correctly, so there's like no otherwise enjoyment to it at all. My ending statement to my dad was that, in summary, I feel like Sleep Token is kind of the musical version of the Dave Gorman colouring in thing, which is basically this thing where he said like, it's when he was talking about food and cookery books, right? He was like, you give a kid like a drawing to colour in, right? If they colour in to a certain point, it looks good. But then if after they've like filled in all the colours, they keep colouring in with more potency of those same colours, eventually it's going to look like fucking shit. And that to me is what Sleep Token's music is. It's too clean, it's too tacky, it's too meticulous, it's too big, it's too trying to be deep for its own good. I just don't get it. And I actually had two more examples of modern fusion bands that in my mind are kind of a good yardstick to judge Sleep Token by. The first one being Baby Metal, right? Which, that is on its face a pretty garish mix. It's like really overblown, victorious sounding, pounding power metal with like J-pop and hip-hop and electronic. It's basically like the Japanese Sleep Token, pretty much. But somehow they actually manage it, right? I mean, I know that I said in a review of Baby Metal's most recent album, the other one in 2023, I said that the reason I didn't like it I didn't like it, I think, as much as I could have, because I think I gave it like a 6.5 out of 10 in the end. I think the reason I said I didn't like it is because it was a very pop way of making a metal album. Like, everything is very overblown, the production is like bricked out to fuck, there's often way loads of things going on in a song at once, and it's a bit like sensory overload, and oftentimes it's not fantastic, right? But those are my criticisms. But what I've neglected to mention up until this point is that when Baby Metal managed to get their songwriting team and whoever they're working with and their vocal performances, when they manage to take all of those elements that they're working with, the J-pop, the electronic, the power metal, the, even metalcore and death metal at points as well, maybe, there have been times where their songwriting is good enough to where they're actually able to balance all of those things all at once and have it still be effective. It's a very difficult balancing act, but they actually do pull it off, right? There's like a decent handful of proper highlights off of their like most recent album. Right? Metal Kingdom is a bit much, but I liked it. Mirror Mirror, absolute highlight. Love that track. Maya is also great. Time Wave is pretty good. Believing, I'd say, is pretty straightforward, but there are definitely enjoyable parts of that track. Monochrome I quite liked as well, and the power ballad The Legend is also pretty solid. Like, none of those tracks are like perfect. I'd say the closest you get to it is like Mirror Mirror, which is actually just a fucking banger, but also Maya's pretty good as well. Yeah, those two tracks are maybe the closest I could say to like barely any complaints. The rest of them, yeah, some of the fusions are a bit garish and some of the songwriting's a little odd, but they are, at the end of the day, good songs, and I think that's what I'm trying to get at. If Baby Metal get their sound right, which is a very difficult balancing act in itself, you get a good song. Whereas with me, I feel like even if you took everything that Sleep Token was trying to work with, and you were like, okay, what is the best possible conceivable version of it? Even then, I still don't think you get a good song, if you know what I mean. Like, it's as if their mission statement is kind of flawed from the jump. A final artist that I actually wanted to make a comparison point to was Poppy, actually, because I've not listened to her full last album from last year, Negative Spaces, which I should do, full disclosure, but the tracks that I have heard from it, that is exactly what Sleep Token could have done, but don't do, right? Like, it's a very weird kind of separation, right? But what I would say is that Sleep Token feel like they want to be a pop group, but have to force the metal aesthetics in there, right? That's what I've said already. Whereas Poppy seems like she enjoys making metal music and also enjoys making pop music. So she'll do tracks that are broadly metalcore songs, but with catchy choruses, maybe the odd synth here or there, a lot of quite atmospheric vocal harmonies. So there's a definite pop touchstone to what she does in what are ostensibly metalcore songs, like pretty true blue metalcore songs, but with that pop accessibility, that pop tinge, right? That's a fusion, you know, because you're getting the touchstones of pop, but the touchstones of metalcore, and they come together into something that is actually like a decently written song because of how the various touchstones from the two genres that she's working with are put together. But then also, you get tracks on the album like Crystallized that are just straight up pop songs, and it's not like Sleep Token where, you know, they do a straight up pop song and you're like, oh, so this is what it's like where the metal gets stripped away. With Poppy, it's more like, oh, so she does cool pop metalcore fusion tracks, but she's also just quite good at making pop songs as well. But I would say that, like, her being good at pop songs isn't a surprise when her fusion of metalcore and pop is already decently good. Whereas with Sleep Token, them making mediocre R&B music isn't really as surprising when their fusion of metal and mediocre R&B music A, already isn't good, and B, feels more of a crutch than it does an actual songwriting effort. With Poppy, it feels like she does pop songs as an exploration of her own artistic intent. Whereas with Sleep Token, them doing pop tracks feels like, okay, we're allowed to let the mask down for a little bit, which to me isn't the same thing at all. And like, I'm not saying that Poppy's album is absolutely perfect. Like, for me, the track Push Go, some of the way that, you know, they fuse the sounds in there, like the pop sounds with the metal sounds, a little bit garish, doesn't really work too well. Like, I feel like with Poppy, it feels like there's a genuine artistic vision there. Like she's gone from a pretty bubblegum pop artist and kind of slowly transitioned and kind of metamorphosized into this kind of metalcore pop fusion artist, but is definitely more true blue metal now than she was, let's say, 10 years ago. If you track her discography, the evolution and the sounds that she's working with feel natural. It feels like a genuine artistic expression. It feels like when she puts pop songs in the middle of a metal album, that's not a token gesture. It feels like that's just how her creativity is manifested in that one area, right? Whereas with Sleep Token, it feels like they looked at trends, they looked at what was working, and they tried to do that, but tried to dress it in a cloak of deepness and kind of theatre that just kind of makes me cringe a little bit. And I know it might sound like I'm being just shitting on Sleep Token and mindlessly praising other people, but it's just genuinely how I see it. With Poppy, the way that she does things, and with Baby Metal, the way that they do things, it feels like a genuine result of actual laboured artistic intent. Whereas with Sleep Token, everything from the way they put themselves across, to the way they fuse their sound, to their production, to their public image, Nothing feels genuine. It feels manufactured, it feels forced, it feels clumped together in not a very good way, and the end result is obviously not fantastic. So is it irredeemable garbage? No. Can I see why 45-year-old men children are shitting their pants about it? Kind of, but they shouldn't be to the degree that they are. I don't even know what the point of this is. I guess I'm just trying to say that, like, fusion can be done well, but Sleep Token don't really do it very well, which I know isn't, like, the most, like, you know, uplifting message to end a video on, but if anything, if I've illustrated something, I should have illustrated why some fusions work and some don't. And I think it's much less to do with just the surface level, okay, what are the sounds that you are fusing? But it's how you do it. It's your presentation. It's the artistic intent. It's, you know, it's everything, and it's all of that kind of coming together. And the thing is, I feel like anything that Sleep Token could have done to fuse their sounds, well, and present their public image and their artistry in a genuinely human, organic way, it's just not there. Whereas Poppy, and Baby Metal, they make music that is very overblown, very large, a lot of things going on. But the intent and the artistry and the vision behind it feels more human. Now, I can already hear what you're saying. You're saying, Evan, Baby Metal are managed by a massive, big Japanese idol pop agency. They are not, organic at all. And, I agree. That is actually one of my main complaints with them, is, how their big pop songwriting, big business approach can often, hinder their songwriting. I mean, I'm seeing it more from the singles from their upcoming album, but it's hindered a lot of their material in the past as well. But what I would say is that, yes, I'm aware that Baby Metal are very much a corporate endeavour, but given the quality of their songwriting that their songwriting team puts together, and just the way that they manifest their public image, because it's done so well, in a way because it's done so professionally, it almost feels organic in the way that they put it across, I think is what I'm trying to get at. But with Sleep Token, the way that they put it across, because it's probably just a small group of guys. I doubt there's a huge industry effort behind them. Maybe there is, I don't know. But I guess because it's such a small group of guys, the stuff that they do can maybe tend to feel more contrived in a way, because they don't have as many heads to put together to construct a way to make it not seem as contrived, which I know is kind of going against my own point in a way, but hopefully that makes sense. But it is just literally just about how they put themselves across and just the vibe that they give me, really. I want to like Sleep Token a lot more than I do, given me enjoying a lot of fusion artists and giving a lot of credit to people who are fusing stuff now. A lot more credit granted than I had given to them about 4 years ago, because I remember I shit on Poppy a fair bit in a video 4 years ago. But do I feel like I'll grow to like Sleep Token in maybe the way that I have grown to like Poppy or Baby Metal? No. No, I don't think so.